Hey everybody, my name is Jeremy Agema with Pinball Mayhem, and today we're interviewing Ryan Claytor. And let's see, looking at my notes here. Ryan, tell us a little bit about yourself.
First, thank you so much for having me on Pinball Mayhem. I've really enjoyed watching your streams and, documentation of different shows like MGC. Anyway, it's been great keeping up with you, so I'm happy to be here. So my name is Ryan Claytor. I am a university professor and a comic book artist, and as you probably see, a pinball enthusiast as well. And I'm here on Pinball Mayhem because Jeremy is very kind and he is offering me a place to talk about my newest book. As I said, I'm a cartoonist, and my most recent book is currently being kickstarted, and you can find that at ahunterstale.com. So this new comic book of mine, A Hunter's Tale, is actually a poem that was written by my late grandfather almost 40 years ago. And this poem has really resonated with me for a very long time. And it's only recently that I started putting pen to paper, and I wanted to sort of collaborate with my grandfather, if you will, on this creative project. He wrote these tremendous words, and I'm trying to keep up with him as far as my illustrations are concerned. And I've turned this into a comic book. So it is 32 pages long. It's full color. Like I said, it's on Kickstarter right now, trying to raise some funding for printing the book and see what else we can do beyond that.
All right, that is really cool. You mentioned this was some stories from your grandfather. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your grandfather?
Sure. So my grandfather was a railroad dispatcher, and he was also a very good shot. And he wrote poetry in his later years as well. He had a really storied life. He was diagnosed with tuberculosis at a very young age, and he was living in the Midwest at the time in a little town called Alma, Illinois. And when he was diagnosed, in the early part of the 20th century, from my understanding, TB was more or less a death sentence. And so they sent him off to the deserts of Arizona and said, hope that the dry desert air will, dry up the tuberculosis. But that was all they could do for him. So off he went, and he lived in the desert and lived off the land. And that's where he became a very good marksman, because he had to kill his food with one shot, basically, because he wasn't supposed to be living off the land. He wasn't supposed to be living in the desert, but it was his only chance at life. So if he didn't hit that food in one shot, then the game warden would understand where he was and would know where to start looking for him. But if he just took one shot, then the warden couldn't figure out where he was. So if he did not shoot his food in one shot, he didn't eat that day. Because I'm here, you probably have surmised that he made it through that ordeal and lived a very long life. He lived into his 90s and, left behind this body of poetry that I find incredibly inspiring, that he was not an artist by trade, but he had these creative pursuits later in life. And especially this poem, it talks about these two seemingly disparate subjects, a hunter and his prey, and they find this unlikely understanding of one another. And so essentially it's this tale of reciprocated empathy. And I don't know what your relationship with poetry is. I don't have a big relationship with poetry, but the way I envision poetry is that you have to read it multiple times and kind of decipher it and figure out what the poet is trying to tell you. And my grandfather's poem is not like that. It's very visual. I feel like I can see the story in my mind as I'm reading it. It's also very narratively driven. So I'm excited to finally visualize this poem that's been with me almost my whole life. Like I said, the poem was written in 83. I was born in 79. So as long as I can remember, this poem has been around.
How did you come across these poems?
My grandfather wrote a number of poems, and I think it was his church that actually put together this booklet of his poetry. There were several dozen poems in there, and this is the one that always stuck with me over the years. I mean, I've read through that body of poetry several times over, of course, but whenever I hit this poem, this was like, the one I kind of linger on. So yeah, it was through that booklet that I remember his poetry. And that booklet was printed in very low runs, and, you can't find it anywhere now, but I'm excited to give his body of work, at least this poem in particular, a longer life than it would have had otherwise.
Excellent. Tell us about the Kickstarter project.
Yeah, so the Kickstarter is happening to kind of celebrate and raise funds for and distribute this book. I've already finished the entire book. It's ready to go. I've talked with the printers that are here locally. I've used local printers here to print dozens of different print projects, from my own books to giant posters for events that I run around town, and they are just always immaculately printed. I just have nothing but good things to say about them. They're BRD printing in town in Lansing, Michigan, brdprinting.com if you want to look them up. And so they have everything they need from me already, but the money. And that's why I'm running the Kickstarter campaign, is to fund the printing of the book. But Kickstarter is also a really great platform for making a big celebration, making a big deal out of something that's about to come to fruition. And my hopes is that that's what will happen for this book, that more people know about it because of that platform. So that's why I'm running the Kickstarter.
With The Hunter's Tale, you mentioned that you illustrated it. How long did that process take from beginning to end?
I started around mid 2021 and finished up around the end of 2021. And the Kickstarter is running in January 2022, throughout the month of January. So about half a year, I would say.
Is there anything else you wanted to touch upon with The Hunter's Tale or the Kickstarter or anything?
Now that you mention it,
Good.
this really did just come to my mind. There's a particular reward tier that I am really excited about. And it's called the book club tier. And at this tier, you get a book, you get it signed, you get a couple of limited edition prints. And on top of that, you also get this limited engagement book club, where basically I'm going to host a private Zoom meeting with, whoever is able to get these rewards. And we're going to have a book club, a book discussion about A Hunter's Tale once it gets into everybody's hands. So, in a few months down the line, we'll schedule a meeting. And I really look forward to chatting with, a couple handfuls of people. I'm going to limit that reward to only 10 people. And so we can kind of keep it nice and intimate, and people can chat and ask questions. So that's probably one I would highlight that I'm particularly excited about. But there's tons of rewards, from the basic book to prints to original artwork. You can even get the original artwork for the cover itself. Yeah, lots of stuff at ahunterstale.com.
We've been talking earlier behind the scenes, and you mentioned that this book was going to be a different size factor for some different reasons. Why don't you go into that?
Yeah, that's a good question. Thank you. So you're right. This book is going to be a little smaller in format. It's 4 1/8 wide by 5 1/4 inches tall. And one of the reasons for that is because I got this particular book. I don't have it with me right now, but it's called Traditions by a Hmong American artist named Dua Chaka Her. And it was this exact size that I just described to you. It was 16 pages long, and I just absolutely fell in love with the format of this book. And I was thinking to myself, I want to make something like this happen. The other thing that was going on at the time, I was reading my grandfather's poetry, and it sort of, fell into line with that book that I was reading at the time. And I thought, you know what, with poetry chapbooks, they're typically smaller in size. They're not like traditional comic book size. And so this might be a good fit for this project.
All right. Is there anything else particular you wanted to go over with the Hunter's Tale?
I guess just reminding people where they can find it, which is at www.ahunterstale.com. It is a Kickstarter campaign, but that will take you directly to the campaign at that URL. So ahunterstale.com.
This wraps up the first part of the interview. I want to say thank you very much for joining me and talking about A Hunter's Tale. And everybody check it out on Kickstarter.
Thank you so much, Jeremy.